We'll get our panel discussions started, and you can tell from the program we've got a great group of life science experts and leaders, and our moderator will be IBJ's Daniel Lee. Dan covers life sciences and healthcare for IBJ. Before joining IBJ, Dan held reporting and editing positions at several newspapers, including covering internet infrastructure and security for the San Jose Mercury News in Silicon Valley. Gives him extra cred, Dan, this morning. And healthcare for the Indianapolis Star. He returned to journalism, joining the IBJ last December. Super happy that he made that decision after spending more than 13 years in marketing and communications at a global maker of high-end bicycle components. So any of your bikers probably know SRAM LLC, and Dan was highly involved there, but we got him back into journalism, and we're glad for it. I found out that you all submitted a whole bunch of questions, and I didn't see any of them. So I used my questions, but Dan, I'm assured, has the questions that you submitted so far, and we'll work to get those in this morning. So now I'll turn our panel over to Dan and our distinguished panel.
Thank you very much, Nate, and it's great to be here. It's great to be with the IBJ, and am enjoying, again, deadline pressures, so getting used to that. And I was so thrilled to cover life science, such a dynamic area, and thank you for the panelists today. We do have the iPad. We had a problem with it earlier, but it's up and running, and I've actually been going through the questions and already incorporating some of those questions into my questions, so please keep them coming. We'll get to some of those. But I want to introduce our panelist right here. Saad Amidi is CEO, as we know, of Plug and Play. He moved to Silicon Valley in the late 1970s, which the name Silicon Valley was still very, very new then, but he's been part of its dynamic environment ever since. He launched Plug and Play in 2006. Since they've worked with 90,000 startups, made over 2,000 investments, and including major hits, as mentioned before, Dropbox, PayPal. And one thing I really liked in reading his bio was that he still considers Plug and Play a family business and tries to keep that atmosphere, which is very important with all of our busy work lives as well. Next, we have Diana Caldwell, is CEO and co-founder of West Lafayette-based Amplified Sciences. She's a serial life science entrepreneur with more than 25 years experience in both large corporations and small startups. As CEO of Amplified Sciences, she served as the entrepreneur in resident of the Purdue Foundry, supporting several early stage startups. And earlier in her career, she had several roles at Eli Lilly and Company. David Rosenberg is the CEO of IU Lab, the inaugural CEO, lots of excitement around that. Previously, he served as Secretary of Commerce under Governor Eric Holcomb's cabinet. In that role, he also led the Indiana Economic Development Corp in all its efforts to grow the economy here in Indiana. Welcome, David. And then finally, Vince Wong, the CEO and president of BioCrossroads. He brings significant experience to his role of advancing Indiana's life science industry. Previously, he was chief commercial officer of Genoscopy, a venture-backed startup company focused on developing gastrointestinal diagnostics. Vince also enjoyed an 18-year career at Roche Diagnostics. So again, a real great combination of startup and major enterprise experience. So welcome very much to our panelists.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Great. David, with the news we just heard from President Whitten, I'm going to start with you. And if you could tell us a little bit, some specifics around what these initiatives mean, the incubator, and particularly some of these stages of startups where, startups can be kind of very fragile to keep going and developing. The pre-accelerator stage particularly, kind of define it and what needs to be done at these different stages to really get these young companies up and running.
Absolutely. Well, first, I want to thank you all for being here. It's great to see so many friends in the room. I want to thank the partners that made this announcement possible. I see Nicole at IU Health, then our friends at Plug and Play and CICP and Generator. I want to thank Jillian Turner for her efforts in getting this to the finish line, even working late last night, getting those agreements done. And I want to thank President Whitten and the IU family for really the bold vision and ambitious strategy that they're implementing. And that takes true leadership. It's not about hollow rhetoric or or cheap headlines or being short-sighted. This is truly a long-term vision, looking out 30 years and making those investments today for those investments to pay off. And that's what bringing these partners together in an unprecedented way will really allow us to do, to translate IU's $1 billion research enterprise and invest in the state's $99 billion life sciences economy, bringing startups from all over the world to partner with IU researchers and industry partners while investing in IU's own ideas and companies ourselves. And so it's a truly unprecedented collaboration between these groups, the first time they're working together in this capacity anywhere in the world. And so we're tapping into that international network, but bringing together the localized expertise, the industry expertise, where I think we'll look back on this day, down the line and say that's where, the next discovery was made, the next product was commercialized, the next unicorn was really founded. So as President Witten mentioned, it's really two main programs within the IU Health Incubator at IU Lab. First is the Pre-Accelerator. Those people, those entities that kind of have an idea, may not even be a formalized company yet, but providing them the wraparound services to help them grow, how to establish an entity, how to do a pitch deck, how to manage the product and put it in a place where the market will take a look at it. And then the Accelerator in partnership with Plug and Play and CICP, for those that have gotten past that accelerator stage and are really ready to take that next jump and start to look at industry partnerships or research partnerships, start to get that early seed venture capital coming in and position themselves in a market to either take on additional investment, potentially be bought out, and really take that next giant leap with their company. And so again, cannot thank the partners enough, IU Health for the sponsorship, CICP, Plug and Play, and Generator for the collaboration, and again, all across the board at IU for the vision that was put in place to really make this investment. It's a huge day for IU, for the life science economy, and for Indiana as a whole.
Thank you, David. Saad, I want to turn to you next. Thank you for coming to Indiana to visit us. And I think it's always amazing to have an outsider perspective. And we talk a lot about life science within our Central Indiana community. But I want to, early in this conversation, get your take on the perception of Indiana from Silicon Valley, from other global places, other national hotspots where you visit. What are viewed as our strengths? How much are we talked about? In our planning phone call for this, your associate talked about how you mentioned Indiana and a small group of states that you think are, kind of newer hotspots.
Yes, first of all, it's great to be here. I visited Warsaw, Indiana with Governor Holcomb to inaugurate our first office in Indiana at the headquarters of Zimmer Biomed about less than a year ago. And at that time, Brandon, who is our state, my boss in Indiana, we said we will have more than one specific industry vertical here. And I'm very pleased to come to Indianapolis and see the charm. I went for a walk this morning at 6 o'clock and the monument, the Capitol. It is incredible, charming city. And as the secretary mentioned, I believe if you brand the Indianapolis as a new Silicon Valley, it can fly. Especially for our model to work, we need great universities that you guys have the best. You have the best engineering school, the best medical school, and then you have incredible assets, as the secretary said. The large Eli Lilly company has changed, a company similar to that has changed the economics of a whole country in Scandinavia. So I feel the combination of universities as well as the base you have with animal health as well, the company that is here, this could become the center of the world for biotech and where genomics, information technology, and health meets. And again, we are so proud to be part of this journey. I met David over a year ago, and he has been to our playground, like our headquarters, which is the old Philips Electronics headquarters, a few times. I invite everybody to join us for the June summit. And then we would love to build the bridge between Indiana and Silicon Valley, because still over 50% of the funding for biotech, for any technology company, is in Northern California. But lately, I heard Secretary talk about Sequoia, Kleiner Perkins, Andreessen Horowitz. Believe it or not, they love to invest outside of Northern California. And we're going to make that possible.
That's fantastic. And actually, when I lived in San Jose, I was a big Oakland A's fan, and that's when the movie Moneyball came out. And when we decided to come back to Indiana, beyond just wanting to come home, I really looked at it as a Moneyball. You got great value from being here, kind of a geographic Moneyball. And it's definitely a topic I want to talk about, because I do have some questions around kind of geography and place to live. And in fact, my next question is for you, Diana, but I want other panelists, I want this to be as much of a conversation as possible. So if you have something to add, please weigh in. And then also please keep the questions coming from the QR code. Diana, so your company, Amplified Sciences, has a really interesting diagnostic to evaluate pancreatic cysts. And great new technology. It grew out of Purdue, 2006. You're in West Lafayette. And one thing that greatly interests me is how things go from like research and an idea, maybe a patent, to a company. And then once it gets to be a company, what are the biggest challenges? So looking at the kind of the lifespan of your company so far, what have been like the most challenging parts, and whether it was actually developing the diagnostic, the venture funding, or as one of the audience members pointed out, like even finding things like lab space, places to be to perform this. So what were those?
Well, it's great to be here. Thank you for the invitation. And it's great to represent startups here on the panel, although many of you had startup experiences. So I think when you think of great technology, there is a lot of it out there, whether it's in wonderful academic institutions here and around the world, or in people's ideas, or in private labs. I think the challenge in life sciences is sometimes we don't work on the right problem to solve with the technology. So part of the journey when I met Joe Davison, so our technology came out of the Davison lab at Purdue University. Composition of matter IP was generated there for amplifying, hence the name, ultrasensitive dye technology for life sciences. And when I met Joe, I was an entrepreneur in residence at the Purdue Foundry, now Purdue Innovates, after selling my first startup. And we really went through the customer discovery process to make sure we thought hard about the first problem to solve. And so you have technology that can translate to all kinds of needs. We decided to work on a very hard problem, which is identifying potential cancer in high-risk patients and pancreatic cancer, the third deadliest cancer. And it has not been easy, but without the resources that now I'm so thrilled to see will be formalized through the announcement today, one of my first customer discovery interviews was sitting down with Dr. Al-Haddad in his office at the old wonderful hospital there that's now going to be a new one. And so we sat down and talked about the need that he had. And since then, we've done a clinical trial prospective collaboration with IU, and then we also leveraged Dr. Max Schmidt's expertise and the largest pancreatic tissue and fluid bank in the country, most likely, right here at IU. So we leaned in and said, let's work on this problem where we think we have a high probability of success, and we can get some traction, and we can solve an important problem. So that's how we started, and I think there's a lot of great ideas and technology that if you don't pair up potential business folks, folks that know how to translate, do clinical trials, and understand the regulatory processes, they might not ever go anywhere. So right problem with the right team. And I have to give a call out to Dr. Davison, to Joe Davison, the right inventor and professor that's willing to lean in and do what it takes to help succeed and kind of let their baby go out of their lab. So important.
Yeah.
Challenges. Okay, so let's just jump to it. Capital. We're fundraising. Please reach out to me if you know of any investors that want to take a journey with the novel diagnostics that's got a CLIA waived regulatory cleared product in Irvine, California. Our CLIA lab is there for many reasons, but it wasn't because we wanted to be in Irvine, California, but that's another story. But they had the plug and play model that not many geographies do, that we could just pay fractional talent, they do it over and over again, and it's a very cost-effective model for us. And then our labs are up in West Lafayette. So capital, fundraising.
Awesome. Vince, if you go to BioCrossroads website and you're kind of a numbers and data person, it's a great place to be. Some of the reports that they do and really just pulling together all kinds of information. I was reading through those and you had a section talking about stressors, and in this report, it talked about, kind of some slowing GOP growth of our sectors in Indiana, and then talking to you this morning. Things can change fast in industry, and we've had all these great exports coming from this state. But I wanted to ask you, what are the biggest challenges, to use the business term, headwinds, that we face, I guess generally, but particularly as Indiana specific as you can get?
Yeah, no, the velocity of change is incredible right now, for better or for worse, right? So if you want to talk about headwinds, we've got so much tailwinds growing, and you've heard all about that, and there's a lot of things to celebrate about that, including being the #1 state for life science exports. But we also can look on the horizon and say, okay, what are the things that might slow our momentum down? And what are the things we can do to mitigate those speed bumps? And try to make sure that we try to shave down the speed bumps to reduce the friction. I think two things. We had a BioCrossroads board meeting earlier this week, and we had a really great discussion about two items that are speed bumps on our horizon. Is NIH funding, and I want to mobilize this audience that is passionate about life science by showing up at 7:30 in the morning. That's evidence of that. To reach out to your representatives, to talk about the importance of NIH funding for the innovation engine that's very special to this country and to the state. And so that's, we're going to see the proposed budget from the White House within the next couple of weeks. Leaked versions of that indicate there might be a 40% cut in NIH funding, which would be devastating. And so much of the innovation that is commercialized by startups or even large companies is really birthed and cultivated and nurtured by these NIH investments. And so certainly there's opportunity for some reform in terms of how we go about doing research and in universities engage in that. But at the same time, there's so much good there. If you go to other countries, there isn't this innovation culture that we have in this country that's so special. And a lot of that is, the foundation of that is NIH funding. And so that would be a call to action I would ask all of you, if you're passionate about life science, is to reach out to your state leaders and your congressional leaders and express, as a voter, the importance of NIH funding. And the second is tariffs. Certainly, being the #1 state in life science exports, we have a lot as a state, on the table with regard to free trade. And so the manufacturer community and even the healthcare systems are calculating some significant impacts if the tariffs continue on. And so those are, again, would be two key headwinds that I think we as a community can rally around and shape the environment. Not that we can completely change the outcome, but I think there's opportunity to shape that. And so that would be a second call to action for all of you as stakeholders in this innovation engine that we really cherish and have so much promise, given all the investments being made that we talked about already.
Does anyone? We've seen a number of announcements from big companies talking about bringing manufacturing here to Indiana and other places in the U.S. Some of that attributed, obviously, to the trade situation and tariffs. So does anyone else have any thoughts on either the NIH funding piece or the tariffs and its effect?
I would like to lean in on the NIH piece. So we were fortunate enough to earn 2 SBIR grants, one with NSF and one with NIH. So that's an additional $400,000 that was brought into the state of Indiana through Amplified Sciences. And Indiana is also critical for those grants because they match 50,000. NIH grant funding doesn't cover everything, capital primarily. So we needed that additional 50,000 for capital, other benefits, the things we needed to do from a financial and accounting reporting standpoint. And that match from the state of Indiana is critical. So really important benefit. We have a pending 2.2 million phase 2, which involves significant clinical trials done here in the state of Indiana through IU Health. So this is important. So you hear the headlines, but I wanted to weigh in and sort of echo to see that you can hear about me. We're an 8-person startup, right? That grant alone would bring in a half-time clinical research person and an additional scientist to manage things and execute. So I think these are real examples of the challenges when you hear about 40% potential cuts that are real for the state of Indiana startup ecosystem.
You know, the team Plug and Play, 800 people strong, we help 3,000 startups per year. It is my intention to help 100 technology startups in this state per year and minimum invest in 10 of them. And as an entrepreneur, I believe entrepreneurs are extremely resilient. I tell them you should do 99% of the work, and Plug and Play can help you with that 1% of connecting you to the right people and the right time. And as an immigrant, I think this is the best country in the world and the highest, like we have a school in Iran called Tariffs, which is MIT, Stanford, and IU combined. And all the brilliant people end up there. And Stanford used to bring 20 top students per year, full scholarship here. And for example, one of the startups I seed funded, it's called Garden Health. It's an AI genome technology that 25% of the cancer patients in America do the test right now. The company went public at $6 billion and now is reaching $1 billion revenue. So my idea of NIH grants and having these great talents build their dream here, I think it's being shattered. And it is quite sad. And I agree with Vince that you should speak out because this country is great. And like I have a very good friend, Doug Leone, who ran Sequoia for 20 years. And I had an event at my shop and I had an Israeli guy, Iranian guy, and an Indian guy. And he told me, Said, you missed the last I, that he's from Italy. But the reality is, Doug used to tell me, Said, you have to have an immigrant in every founding team because their work ethics and how they want to prove themselves in this country makes everybody else work harder. And if you take mini startups like Google, like Tesla, like NVIDIA, it all has a major immigrant component to it. And we cannot lose that special power and what I would say have made US the #1 in the world in technology. We have great American students, great American PhD, but when you put them side by side with the immigrant, it makes everything better and harder. And again, I do agree with Vincent, we should speak out to not reduce the NIH grant and not, I heard there, like from Sebastian, the CEO of Accor, the largest hotel chain, this summer, 30% less people will visit America. It is not a joke, 30% less people visiting America. And people like Europeans actually plan ahead. I go somewhere tomorrow morning, you know. But the reality is this is going to have a long-term bad effect on us. And again, I love America, and I like it to be great again.
David.
Just want to touch on, not underscoring the incredibly devastating impacts that the NIH and NSF cuts could have, but one area where we're really leaning into the lab, not knowing what's going to happen at the federal level, is really pushing those academia, research, and industry partnerships and trying to be that front door to bridge those gaps, to get more of that industry-sponsored research within the universities and really open, tear down those ivory towers, open up the doors, and figure out where industry wants to go and how can the assets of a university like IU help them get there. And we've had some great conversations with industry partners across the board in kind of all walks. And I think there's a lot of interest. Again, let's not just sit back and see what happens, but everyone still wants to be very aggressive because there is so much potential and so much innovation that can occur as we look out to the future. And so if there is a silver lining in all of this, I think it is that the alignment between academia and industry could come out even stronger, and those innovations and commercialization could happen at a faster pace because of those partnerships.
Completely agree. I've noticed every academic center I'm approaching right now, from Stanford to Ohio State, there's a commercial dedicated person and things are moving a little faster. So I actually, in a very short time period, have noticed a difference.
Yeah, no, and I think hats off to President Whitten and you, David, and the whole IU team. I think we've seen a transformative shift at IU to have that mindset of being a partner with industry, and there's so much latent, exciting potential that sits within the labs at IU, whether it be in Bloomington or at the School of Medicine here in Indianapolis. And I think you're setting the conditions to unlock that potential and bring the industry partners together to Indiana to tap into that IP and talent, and then also bring venture capital as well, like Saad.
Thank you so much. May I add something to what David said? We brought, I believe, 12 technology startups to Warsaw, Indiana, about 8 months ago, from all over the world, and California, I must say. That's another side of the world. And 4 out of the 12 decided to stay in Warsaw, Indiana, mainly because you could have great technology in a university lab, but you need somebody like Ivan Torres of Zimmer Biomet to believe in the technology and help you to scale it, help you to co-develop it and distribute it. And with Roche, where you were for more than 17 years, they know diagnostic better than anybody in the world, as far as I'm concerned. But as you said, the speed of change, that diagnostic is moving from hospitals and labs to home, you need the entrepreneurial spirit to make that happen. We will do more tests in adult communities at home that we would do in the labs. And that transition is almost like the automotive industry changing to electric, autonomous, connected car. Big corporations are not good at that. You kind of need to combine the power of Eli Lilly with the power of an entrepreneur and the agility of an entrepreneur to make magic happen. And that's what we hope to do with the IU lab here.
Yeah, we have great question from the audience I want to ask now. And it kind of starts off and says, there's too much talk about home run derby. I think all the early stage applied research seems not to be sexy enough. Drugs need to get approved via clinical trials, and the industry does not seem to be supported in significant ways in our states. Any thoughts on that? Clinical trials, kind of the nuts and bolts work of.
Right. I think, one of the challenges isn't like Ohio that has, 4 medical schools. I mean, we have 2 medical schools. I think one of the challenges is making sure that we go where there's supportive infrastructure and clinicians that can enable rapid, in our case, sample collection and then follow on with patients to see how they progress. So I think that being really good at clinical trials is hard for a lot of startups. And honestly, with my time with Lilly, the big guys aren't that good at it either. There's a lot of inefficiencies in that process. So leaning into technology, I'd probably like to throw this to Vince because I think Genoscopy took a very novel approach in their colon cancer, colorectal cancer space to clinical trials that's sort of game changing.
Yeah, and actually, I was talking with a leader at Lilly as well, and they're embracing this approach of leveraging social platforms from patient recruitment. A lot of the time, the bottleneck and expense related to clinical trials is like patient recruitment. And so how do companies more effectively leverage social platforms, geo-targeting to be able to reach diverse patient audiences, which is increasingly being required by FDA, but do that in a cost-effective way. And so I think that's very much being adopted, embraced by companies, and my prior company was definitely one of the leaders in that. We recruited 10,000 patients in under a year, leveraging social platforms, and we're able to attract a very diverse patient cohort as a result, and did it at a third of the price as our friends at Garden did. No rivalry there. But to your point, Saad, around diagnostic testing being done at home, exactly. I think Roche now has a patient collection, a sampling methodology for HPV testing, which is awesome. It just increases accessibility for that critical testing for women. And then, companies like Genoscopy and Exact Sciences and many other companies in COVID definitely ushered in an era of self-testing at home as well. So definitely that's a big trend, and I think that's going to only expand more and more, and I hope to see some of that take root at IU Lab as well.
What is on the horizon for the Indiana life science sector with AI, uses of AI? How well is Indiana positioned in this area? And you can talk about some of the improvements, but also there's so much talk about jobs and what could it do to jobs in this sector. Will it mean fewer jobs? Will it create other types of jobs?
So if I may take a crack at that, about a month ago, I opened the office at the University of Washington in Seattle with the largest research institution of Japan, SBI. And, they are research for hire. They are not a pharma, but they are the biggest supplier of research for pharmas in Japan. And their belief is AI will help the clinical trial period to reduce to 1/10. If, government plays along well. And recently, that is called AI Center of Excellence for Pharma, the one in University of Washington. And next month, we will launch an office in Orlando, Florida, with GuideWell, Orlando Health, and Advent Health. And it's combining healthcare with payers and providers to take cost out of our healthcare system. Because I believe, and we like to prove it, that 30% of our healthcare cost is wasted between communication, approval, and everything. And AI, if we allow it and use it correctly, ethically, can take cost out. And Secretary talked about upscaling. There is shortage of nurses, there is shortage of doctors, there is shortage of medical clinicians. So everybody can upgrade their talent and make a better healthcare at much less cost. And again, I believe the combination of great universities like IU and the hospital systems, when they collaborate together with the entrepreneurs, again, I think all of a better future is in front of us.
Yeah, absolutely. I think every conversation we've had with industry partners has had that through line of AI and ML and data science. And even those industry partners don't know where that technology is going or how they'll be using it a year from now. It's already happening in drug discovery, but how can you accelerate that pace? How can you use AI to look at images and do predictive analysis on patients who don't even have a disease yet and have earlier intervention? So it is really upending the entire industry, and even the large players are still trying to understand how it's going to be used. I think from the workforce component that Saad mentioned, that's one thing we're really looking at, and the lab will have true academic classroom space on 16 Tech. And so Luddy's biomedical engineering and informatics masters will be housed out of the lab. We're working with the Kelley School of Business. We're working with School of Medicine and School of Science, really trying to bring interdisciplinary approaches where it's not just a School of Medicine class, but how can we have folks from Luddy looking at the AI and the informatics piece of medicine and of life sciences to make those giant leaps? How can we have the Kelley School of Business and their professional development and the business of biotech come in working with Luddy School of Science, School of Medicine in an interdisciplinary way to advance the adoption of these new technologies in this industry? And so the workforce piece of that is going to be so critical as AI continues to make a bigger and bigger impact on the big players and the life science industry overall.
David, I'd like to build on that and share a real life example of a Purdue IU Amplified Sciences collaboration in this space. So, what clinicians do really well is they integrate multimodality pieces of information. And we need to leverage that to make them smarter, empower them, and to bring that into, I think, product offering. So right now, Amplified Sciences' lead product that's regulatory cleared uses very elegant machine learning. We can call it AI, and we do, because it's important to mention that. So, but that's just looking at 3 biomarkers and how they work together in the patient's fluid. We have a pilot study with the MD PhD at Purdue, and her expertise is MRI, AI analysis of MRI. So it's AI-enabled MRI. And we're with Max Schmidt's lab at Indiana University, and we're looking at patients that both of our modalities have tried to assess these pancreatic cystic lesions and see how we make each other better. And we'll now go forth. We've got some proof of concept data. It's a small overlap. We're now going to go forward for some grant funding. And we really want to bring in the eyes of the doctor that's seeing this imaging when they're procuring the sample and they're looking at these cystic lesions. How can we use MRI, EUSFNA, multimodality to pull it in with the biomarker, the rich content you can get out of biomarkers altogether? I think it's here. It's happening right now. So we just haven't always called it that. And I think we need to create more support mechanisms to help with the talent and processes to pull that data together, because it's hard.
And I think AI is predicated on being trained on large data sets. And I think one asset that we have here in the state that been through a partnership with all universities and IU Health, IU, and led by Darshan at Analytics IN is our clinical genomic database. That we now have over 35,000 patient samples. I think that's right, Darshan, of sequenced patient samples that then becomes this, and then counting, that becomes this rich data set that AI models can be built on and trained on. And I think that's when we got those kinds of assets, that's really a treasure trove that AI can go to work on. Actually, was having a Easter breakfast with my nephew, who's master's computer engineering major at Purdue, and he and his buddies developed a AI platform for clinician speech recognition and clinical decision support. But that needs to layer on top of an EHR, and we all know how Epic and Cerner are so hard to deal with. And so, that that bottom line is there is talent in our ecosystem to develop these tools. We got to marry that talent with the data sets that we have in our ecosystem, and then unlock really the potential of marrying the talent with the data sets. I think we could do something pretty special here in Indiana around that.
Yeah, I'd like to talk about geography a little bit. A lot of the initiatives around life sciences in Indiana maybe come out of West Lafayette or Bloomington, or in the greater kind of downtown region around the medical school. But yet there's been so much development of businesses, cities like Fishers, a lot of arts and culture things popping up downtown Indy as well as other communities. The industry really talks a lot about cooperation and collaboration, but is a little bit of competition good? I mean, for different cities. You certainly see that in Silicon Valley, whether it's Palo Alto, San Jose, Santa Clara. A little bit of competition as well, and do you expect that to kind of ramp up?
Yeah, I think most cities have an initiative to try to build their life science ecosystem, because you can see, our average wage of a life science employee is well above the state's average. And so these are high knowledge, high paying jobs. And so every governor and their respective Secretary of Commerce is going after the sector. And so we've got to stay on top of our game. We've got to continue to invest and make those bold investments that Secretary Adams was talking about. He was right. Massachusetts and Texas have made significant investments. MD Anderson is MD Anderson because the state of Texas invested $10 billion in bonds over 15 years to make that happen. That didn't happen by accident. The same thing with Massachusetts. That was a bipartisan, whether it be Republican or Democrat governors continuing to keep their eye on the ball and continuing to invest across administrations, and that long-term view and commitment to investing in that ecosystem has helped nurture and cultivate that cool innovation space. So I think that's what's going to enable us to continue to grow and really become in the same breath as San Diego, Boston, Bay Area, and Indianapolis.
Yeah.
And if I can add to that, in real estate, they say there is 3 important things: location, location, and location. And spending some time here, I honestly feel, like Vincent said, this could be the center of the world for health tech. You have everything it's needed, incredible corporations, incredible universities. And from the last year's visit here, you have the will to do it. And again, I'm just so grateful you have invited us to join this journey. And we are very, very excited to be part of the platform here that will be Boston looked to us and say they took over our leadership. Sometime soon, in my lifetime.
What I do think makes Indiana unique is it is not a race to the bottom or competition amongst every city. There are, everybody wants them located there, but they realize, the tide lifts all boats. And so as we were looking at the LEAP district, and the location was very strategic because it was right on that 50-yard line of Purdue University and the engineering and talent that comes out of there, down through LEAP and then into the new Indiana University and Purdue University campuses with the largest medical school and those programs, and then down through Bloomington and the connections with Crane and microelectronics. And so I think as the sell to companies around the world was that true corridor where you could attract talent from 20 miles north, 20 miles south, and have everything you need in that cluster. And so again, I don't think it's Fishers versus Indianapolis versus Warsaw. I think having the talent, having that clustering, that collaboration is really the selling point in my previous role that we saw industry be really appealing to industry and win a lot of those investments.
Great. I want to take another audience question. And this is an interesting one, I think touches on a larger point. With managing health at home using life science products, how important will patient-friendly digital health technologies be? Do you envision collaboration between science and technology companies? And it was mentioned earlier with more products. I just read a story about a Roche product that has self-administration. There's more at-home testing that's grown out. Is this an emerging area of, kind of from the last few years of people doing things in different environments at home and that we need to pay attention to? Absolutely.
I think you have increasing miniaturization and consumerization of sensors that are wearables, but then you also have technology that could be deployed in the home. Actually, that was one of the first technologies I looked at when I joined Roche back in 2003 was remote patient monitoring. We were way ahead of our time, but I think there's just so much opportunity for technologies, whether it be embedded in your home, smart refrigerators, smart weight scales, smart toilets that then are sending data in the cloud that's attached to sensors you're wearing on your body that can help with regard to chronic disease management, and also as aging population monitor, just well-being, falls, have leveraging AI to be able to predict events based on multivariate analysis. So I think there's just a lot of opportunity for that trend to accelerate, and I suspect we'll see some of those at the IU Lab. So.
One comment on point of care. Point of care doesn't always mean in a patient's bathroom. Point of care could be at the Minute Clinic, at a non-specialty physician that needs access to disposable, cost-effective ways to diagnose. And so I think really thinking about where we can get those diagnostics or those products to the point of care that's needed, and sometimes that is in the home. But I think the send-out lab model that we're using right now for market entry is where most go. But I think it's important to really think about where the decision is making so we can expedite and get the best clinical decision out there.
Great. Nate, do we have time for one more question, or where are we on our time? Well, thank you so much. It was a great discussion.
Thank you so much for having us.